Hello, welcome to another ISCA podcast series. My name is Fu, and I'm your host today. In this episode, we will discuss about Vietnam changing regulatory framework and what it means for investors. With us here today is very special guest from Calvin Cheer Partnership. His name is BJ Bernardo. He is currently a partner of Calvin Cheer Partnership. Hi, BJ. Good to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's good to be back here in Ho Chi Minh City.
It's a pleasure.
Yes, indeed.
Can you let the audience know a little bit more about yourself? And,
Sure. I've been with the firm for the last 12 or so years. I began in 2013. And I am generally helping out with the corporate and transactional matters in our Singapore office. I used to be based mainly in Myanmar and until 2021, 2022 after COVID when I relocated to Singapore, and I have been asked to help out now with our regional offices. And Calvin Cheer Partnership, of course, is a regional law firm. We are headquartered in Singapore, as you know, and we have offices across key cities in the region, including Vietnam. We have offices in Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. And of course, we also have offices, as I said, in Indonesia, Bangkok, Myanmar, and we have strong ties with local offices in Malaysia and the Philippines. For Vietnam itself, KCP has been here since 1993.
More than 30 years.
More than, I don't know what the math is, it's probably older than me. No, I'm kidding. I'm pretty old as well. But yes, we have definitely been here in Vietnam for a long time. We have seen quite a bit of the developments from when it first opened up its economy from a rather controlled regulation to where it is today. And we have helped quite a number of investors, mainly from Singapore and the region, to enter into the Vietnam market. So we do have a very good background, I would say, of not only the international and the international best practices for doing business in developing countries, but also we do have the local know-how onshore with our teams in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. BJ, many people actually call 2025 a reset year for Vietnam's legal environment. What's your take?
Well, I wouldn't really call it a reset in the strict sense, no? Because if you say a reset, it seems that you are changing everything and starting again from scratch. It's not exactly the case, no? Because what we have seen is while they have passed this very significant number of laws, no, a lot of the already existing legislations and policies and decrees are still there.
Right.
So instead, what I think the Vietnam government has been doing is more of trying to streamline, modernize, and I would say acclimatize the existing legislations that are there to the more dynamic, modern era of technology, AI, and all of these things. Like take for example, the way that they have, it's quite interesting. You can only see this probably in countries such as Vietnam, where they will amend the constitution and change the entire structure of government. Meaning that instead of if you have provinces, districts, and communes, like before, now you just basically just have provinces and communes, no more districts.
So two
levels only, So this will, definitely change a lot of things in the way the citizens and the investors and the businesses deal with the government, and the way, of course, the government will deal with citizens as well. So, we have seen all of these changes, and we are very, of course, excited with all of these changes. Focusing specifically on investor laws, we've seen that there has been a very robust investment framework in Vietnam. It's been there for a long time. The government has been amending it, fine-tuning it. And of course, the most recent amendment that just came this year is the fact that because of this administrative change I was just talking about, it's now possible for provincial boards or provincial committees to approve investments.
I see.
There used to be, or previous to these changes, in order for you to get specific investments approved, you had to go to the national government. You had to get the Prime Minister's approval and all of these things. Now, it's possible for investors of a particular size of investment. So these are your urban renewals, your infrastructure developments, etc., large-scale housing. You don't have to go all the way to the national level. You can just go to the provincial boards and provincial committees to approve this. So in a certain sense, it empowers the local governments. It allows local governments to take more charge of their economic development. And at the same time, it also allows investors to be more active in engaging with the local governments, rather than having to, you say, kowtow, so to speak, to the national authorities and all of these things. There are, in my mind, positives and negatives to this. We've seen this done in Myanmar, by the way. because in Myanmar, for example, they've also, in the recent investment law, allowed local governments or non-national level bodies to approve.
Was it recent or?
It was probably late after 2015, definitely. The foreign investment law, the investment law of Myanmar was made, I think, 2018. I forget the specific provision, the specific year. But they also did the same thing. They empowered local governments to approve. Now, on a policy basis, it was good. But on an operational basis, there were, of course, unintended consequences. And this could possibly also happen in Vietnam. We will have to wait and see. And what the unintended consequence for this is, of course, as investors, used to be you just had to go to Yangon or you just had to go to Naypyidaw. Now, if you're doing an investment in a particular area, you had to physically go there.
Right.
And that included more costs, more transportation expenses, and all of these other things. No, and at least in Myanmar, until now, it's sometimes difficult for you to get to all of these different townships and get approvals from the local governments, etc. So it's quite possible that with empowering your local governments, in this case, the provinces will have to step up. They will have to also meet the investors where they are. Otherwise, it will also create some sort of a disconnect with the way investors are going to deal with the local governments, similar to what happened in Myanmar. So, again, it's an exciting time. It's a new framework to approve investments because you now go to the local governments. But there are also inherent changes.
Right.
And I think the other thing that we will have to consider, I think, from an investment perspective as well, is this whole new change in the enterprise law, where shareholders or owners will now have to be declared as the ultimate beneficial owners of a company. In other words, companies that are registered in Vietnam are now required by the amendment to the Enterprise Act to declare and to record who the ultimate beneficial owners are.
I see. So are there any implications that for investors?
Yeah, no, definitely. For investors, in the sense, it's more transparency.
Right.
In countries such as developing jurisdictions, what we have seen, of course, is there are a lot of people, not necessarily to circumvent the law, for purely legitimate reasons. No? They usually enter into a market and try to enter it with the assistance of a local person. Okay? Because the local person has know-how, has the connections, has the infrastructure onshore.
I see.
And sometimes it is easier to actually register the business in the name of the local rather than in the name of the foreign investor. And there is nothing, in a certain level, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Because in a certain sense, you're just trying to mitigate your risk. But again, the difficulty is the moment that you create some sort of a disconnect between who is the registered owner and who is the actual beneficial owner, then there could be all of these potential areas of abuse. And that is unfortunately what we have seen in other jurisdictions where you have money laundering and all of these fraud organizations, etc. etc.
So previously, they register a local person.
Yes.
But the beneficial owner is the foreign investor.
Is a foreign investor.
And nobody disclosed the name of the foreign investor
because the law did not require it. Okay. Of course, there are certain circumstances where the law requires you to do it, that you cannot have, so to speak, a nominee or a trustee. But again, I emphasize, though, I'm not disparaging the people who do adopt these frameworks because there could be legitimate business reasons for you to do this. But again, unfortunately, you have to take the good with the bad. So whenever you have a policy such as this that allows you to have some sort of a disconnect between registered ownership and beneficial ownership, then there is this tendency sometimes for people to abuse that for nefarious ends. And that is why a lot of countries overseas, in the ASEAN region, globally even, have precisely moved towards more transparent ownership structures. And that includes, in this case, and Vietnam has been adopting it as well, the need to declare your ultimate beneficiary. And Vietnam is not alone in this. The Philippines did it, Myanmar did it, Singapore has done it. So Vietnam will not be alone in this, and the investors who are coming into Vietnam should not be afraid of it. But I think part of it is, of course, to understand what it involves. So presently, if you look at the Enterprise Act requires you to disclose who your beneficial owner is. And who is the beneficial owner? A beneficial owner is any person who has direct or indirect control of at least 25% of the chartered capital of a company, of the enterprise. Or who has the power to sway the board or to control the board and the management of that company. So if you fall within that definition, even if you are not the registered owner, you're not the person who is in the charter or in the articles of the company, Vietnam government now requires that that company disclose it to the Vietnam government. Okay. Now, on the one hand, it enhances transparency because the Vietnam government will now be able to look into who is the actual owner of this. Are these all? Where is the money coming from to fund this business?
I see.
And that is the reason why you have to declare ultimate beneficial.
I see. So if someone who has less than 25% of ownership, if that person has the power to control the board, then will that person be the beneficial owner?
Yes, you have to declare that.
Right.
So in other words, there's the way I understand the law, no? I mean,
Right.
it's a two-tier test. So there is the direct or indirect ownership percentage or the ability to control. So if you have the ability to control the board, even if you technically don't have 25%,
I see.
then technically you are
then you have to
the owner.
disclose,
Then you have to disclose that.
Okay.
Now, the way to look at it as well is this, no? I mean, and I don't know how exactly the Vietnam government is going to implement this, but the way I've read the regulations is that only the Vietnam government will be able to look into this ultimate beneficial owner. In other words, people on the street cannot find out who the ultimate beneficial owner is.
So it's private.
It's private. So there is still this modicum of privacy. Similar to in Singapore, for example, you have to declare who your beneficial owners are, but this is only transparent to the ACRA, to the corporate regulator.
Right. Okay.
So I as a man on the street cannot go online and download who is the whole beneficial owner check. So at least there is that safeguard of certain privacy of okay, I am the beneficial owner, I will declare who the beneficial owner is, but at the same time, this information will not be transmitted to the entire universe. It's only going to be made known to the regulators. And again, that is something that I think in my experience as well, it takes a bit of a cultural change because a lot of investors, as you can imagine, want to keep their affairs, low down, secret, quiet, not disclosed to the government. Again, not because they're hiding something, but because again,
they just want privacy.
They just want privacy,
Yeah,
so I mean, this is something that I think the business community and the investing community will have to wrap their heads around because it is in fact a growing trend. It's not only in Vietnam, it's in all of the jurisdictions that in fact I have been advising. Myanmar, Singapore, the Philippines, Malaysia, the United States, and the EU are very big now with this ultimate beneficial ownership. Only because they want precisely to make sure that companies in these jurisdictions are not inadvertently used for unlawful purposes.
So in summary, with this amended enterprise law, so there will be no more nominee in the shadow, right? So that's
no, there can be nominee arrangements,
right?
But you will have to disclose who your principal is.
You have to disclose.
Yes, so it's impossible for you to have a nominee arrangement in that sense. That we have an arrangement wherein you hold the shares, but you will have to declare who you hold the shares for. That's the thing.
I see.
So,
got it.
So you can still have a nominee arrangement in that sense.
But not in the shadow.
But you have to. The only thing is you have to declare who you're holding.
Yes. Okay.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
PJ. So Vietnam. I understand Vietnam has also been pushing for digital transformation.
Yes.
How does that show up in the law?
Well, the recent change that I've seen is the fact that you will now have to, corporations particularly, will now have to use this VNEID.
Compulsory, right?
All corporations,
Yes.
Both past and now people who are moving forward will now have to use this VNEID.
Yes.
I don't know if ISCA is using this. I mean, you have to do it now.
Well, we have to, right? Because
Correct.
It's compulsory for everyone.
Exactly. I mean, the way I understand this VNEID is that regulators will now require that all of these companies deal with the regulator through this identification. So if you're going to pay your taxes, if you're going to submit your returns to the Vietnam government, etc., you will have to use this portal and use this identification. In fact, I understand that foreigners who have been in Vietnam for more than 12 months can also apply for this ID. I don't know if this is something that will be very beneficial for people who are actually doing business. Again, from my experience, the portal is only as good as the people operating it. Because sometimes you have a portal that doesn't work. This is a chronic problem in the Philippines. Supposedly the Philippines has modernized, done all of these can click everything, etc. But the links don't work, the downloads don't work.
Right.
And since though they don't work, now people just don't know where they're going to go now because that supposedly is the point. So we're hoping that with the rollout of all of these digital tools and this digital identification and the use of the DMEID, that the Vietnam government has been able to make sure that the technical mechanisms that we will be using will be also at the same time seamless. Because otherwise it will just defeat the purpose.
Yes. Otherwise it will be like a mess.
It's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, very difficult for everyone.
And more on top of that, Funo, I mean, I think the more important thing for us to consider is the passage and the implementation of the PDPA, the Personal Data Protection Act in Vietnam. It was, I think, approved in June. It will be effective next year. So there is
starting from January next year.
Starting from January next year. So there is a period of time within which people can acquaint themselves with the requirements. But the important thing to remember here, though, is that the Personal Data Protection Act is actually not new. Vietnam does have a data protection regime already in the form of Decree 13. Decree 13 is essentially a government issuance. It's not a national level law, but rather a government issuance from the ministries that basically said, these are your obligations when dealing with personal data. Yes. So it already exists. No? And the framework for protecting data is already there. So it defines, for example, what personal data is. It's personal data and sensitive personal data. You have your obligations, rights as a data subject, and your obligations as a data controller. You have all of those obligations for transferring data overseas, etc. In fact, even requires you to have a sensitivity, risk analysis when you disclose data overseas and all of these things. In fact, we have a couple of clients in Vietnam who have had to make submissions to the Ministry of Information. They are forms that you have to fill in. You have to have it's rather difficult for you to actually do it. It's very meticulous. So the law, the regulations are already there. But I think the important point that I'd like to convey here is, what does the PDPA do if the Regulation 13, if the Decree 13 is already there? What the PDPA does, it actually formally codifies the penalties and the enforcement mechanisms. So previously, under Decree 13, it was just an administrative issuance. It was just essentially administrative fines. It was not clear how people would get penalized. Perhaps you just will not get licenses and permits, etc. But under this new PDPA law, it now provides for clear-cut penalties for non-compliance. So this includes, for example, criminal violations. If you misuse data, personal data, if you disclose personal data, for example, in violation of the law, you can get imprisoned. If you do not comply with the PDPA requirements, such as data protection rights of the data subject, or if you're transmitting data overseas without a risk, without a risk analysis, etc., you could be fined up to 10 times the value of your gross revenue. Things like this. So in other words, the PDPA now, as it will be effective next year, provides teeth to the regulations that have to be followed. Now, fortunately, if you are a small or medium-sized enterprise, I understand that there is a grace period of 5 years. But unless you are dealing with what they call high-risk data processing, I don't know what exactly high-risk data processing is. But suffice it to state, I think people will now have to be more aware of the obligations for data protection. Whether they are collecting data protection, they have to make sure that the people that they are collecting data from consent to the particular use. That the person collecting the data, the enterprise collecting the data, has to disclose the purposes, why you are collecting the data. You have to provide them with the rights within which to terminate the use of personal data. In fact, under the law now, if you're an employer, after you terminate the employment of an employee, you have to delete the personal data of that employee. Otherwise, you could be, as I said, penalized.
Unless the employee
they consent,
right?
exactly.
Unless
they consent, exactly. So all of these things are meant to bring to the forefront the need now for enhanced data protection awareness.
Right.
It is, and I'm seeing this as well, not only in Vietnam, I'm seeing it across the region. No? The Philippines has a very robust PDPA regime. Singapore more so.
Singapore, of course,
is very serious in PDPA protection as well. And of course, you have the EU, the GDPR. The GDPR is the, I would say, the mother of all data protection regimes that actually catch all people, even if you're not in the EU, for as long as you're doing business with an EU person, technically you are captured by the EU regulation. So that is just to say that businesses cannot just go ahead and do business and collect data without understanding how they are or how they can use that data.
Right.
Especially now, in the age of AI, in the age of technology, where you can just
That's right.
get information everywhere. You have to have all of these data protection policies. You have to appoint a data protection officer. In fact, if you are a large corporation, I think under the law, you have to have a data protection department. All of these things. So it's worthwhile for people to keep that in mind, especially both people coming into Vietnam and people who are already here.
I see. So I think that our government is getting towards more strict, introducing a stricter law on personal data protection. Previously, I think that like what you mentioned, right? That there were not there wasn't a clear penalty for violating.
Decree 13, yes,
violation,
correct.
But for now, you can be in prison if you violate personal data
Under the new PDPA, correct.
And now employers, after the contract with the employee ends, they will have to delete everything, right?
Unless there's consent. Unless they allow.
Okay.
Unless there is a provision in the
Okay.
contract that says you allow you to keep for particular purposes.
Okay.
Yeah. Like for example, I have to contact you after to pay your whatever,
Of course.
all of these things. Consent is still important, in other words. But there are, again, the law spells out all of those circumstances wherein consent is necessary, or when consent is implied, or there are certain circumstances when you don't even need to take consent anymore. So all of these are in the new law, which were not in the old decree 13. Decree 13
will be effective since from
January. Correct, 2026.
Got it. Since we just mentioned employers and employees, I think that labor law always raises questions. So, are there anything new in 2025 that employers and employees must
I think the interesting thing that the recent change that will probably have a commercial impact on employees or employers for that matter as well is the fact that foreigners who are here for more than 12 months now have to participate in the social security system.
And they don't have any choice.
And they don't have a choice. It's mandatory. So they have to be registered as a social security in the social security system of Vietnam. They have to contribute a portion of their salaries to the social security system. Of course, at the same time, if you contribute, then you will be entitled to benefits. But I think the point here is that if you are working for more than 12 months, then technically you ought to be treated like a Vietnamese employee.
You should, right? Yeah.
Because you've been here for quite a bit of time already. So therefore, because of that fact, they will now require employers and employees to include this foreign employer as part of the social security. Which means, in turn, that the employer has to contribute, I think, 8%. I'm not sure of the specific percentages. But the employee will have to contribute a certain percentage of his salary into the social security. And then the employer as well will have to contribute. So, of course,
is it different from foreign employees and local employees?
No, it's the same. It's the same. As far as I'm aware, it's the same. The moment that you cross that threshold of 12 months, you are treated just like a Vietnamese employee in terms of social security.
Okay. Yeah. And how about the other things that Vietnamese employees have to attend, like trade union?
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because I think, I don't know about other countries, but if you are that same employee, a foreign employee who's been here for more than 12 months, you can also join a grassroots union. So you can now, unionize, you can join in collective bargaining, do all of these other things like a local employee can do. It's quite interesting. I mean, I don't know, frankly, I don't know the percentages of the number of foreign employees who are here in Vietnam who would qualify to join unionization efforts. But again, it's quite interesting because in other countries, I have not seen, or at least in the Philippines, I have not seen foreign employees being allowed to join unions, to unionize and to collectively bargain with the employer. So this is something that's new, together with the inclusion of the foreign employees as social security members.
I see. So with the recent change, is there any more flexible requirement for foreign employees?
Well, I think, if you're pertaining, for example, to the fact that if you're an expert, I think there are laws now, very recently, that shorten the qualification requirements for you before you are able.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
That's how I understand it. So you do not have to have you do not have to be an expert or show qualifications of more than 3 years or something. It can be a shorter period of time that will qualify you now to work as an expert in Vietnam. That's the way I understand it. again, the finer details, and I'm afraid we will have to look into
Sure.
legislations, but that's the way I understand it as well. So in other words, they're trying to make
It's easier.
entry of foreign talent easier in Vietnam.
That's great. I think
Yeah.
that's very good news for employers and foreign employees in Vietnam, since it's easier, right?
Sure. For experts, no. I mean, I assume that these are persons who have talent that you cannot necessarily find in existing Vietnamese people. Because what I have seen as well in other countries is that the moment that you open foreign employment to everybody without qualification, it's usually the local employees who will suffer. Because we will keep on employing more foreign.
And local people will find it harder.
Correct. So the way that they have done it, again, I speak of my Philippine experience, and I think it's also in Singapore, is like this. You can only hire a foreigner if and only if you are able to establish that a Filipino does not have the same set of skills that you need.
Okay.
And that's the only time you can hire. I'm not quite sure of the Vietnamese regulations. I suspect that there is some sort of a regulation like that also. That's why you have all of these qualifications for foreigners, etc. Except that they've just shortened it from 3 years to 1 year, etc. But again, this is something that will be worth thinking about, not so much from an employee side or employer side, but from a policy perspective. How much foreign talent are you going to be allowing into the market without harming your own local citizen work pool?
I see. For Singapore, I think there's a minimum salary requirement.
Well, if your employment pass,
yes.
If
for
you
employment pass, right?
For employment pass, I think it's
$6,000.
6,000, etc.
Yeah.
But remember, there are S passes and all of these, worker passes. I mean, E passes are intended for those professionals, highly educated positions, etc. But remember that it is also possible for foreigners to come into Vietnam, into Singapore as unskilled work. I mean, as contract workers and all of these other things, which again, people are saying are precisely in Singapore skewing the employment market. People are hiring, the employers are hiring too many foreigners. What happens to the Singapore citizens? But that's a conversation for another time, no? I mean, living in Singapore, you kind of see it every day.
Let's focus in Vietnam.
Exactly. So I mean, I'm just saying that from a policy perspective, it is something worth looking at. But definitely, the fact that you are opening up the market to foreign talent, subject to certain limitations, is a good thing for employers because they have a bigger pool to choose from when hiring people.
Especially in those jobs that foreign employees may
Yes.
better than local.
Correct.
Okay, great. So initially you mentioned that there was a major change, right? Especially in terms of our administrative map. So there's a major change recently. So PJ, how does that affect investors?
Well, it will affect investors. I think, again, I already said earlier, it may affect investors because they will now have to deal with a different set of regulators. You have to look at it from the perspective both of the fact that the investment law now allows provincial level officials to approve investments, and at the same time it merges certain provinces, it removes certain departments, and in a certain sense, therefore, from a practical perspective, you now have to recalibrate who it is that you're going to be dealing with. Previously, you just had to deal with Hanoi, or used to be you just had to deal with Ho Chi Minh City, no, now with the offices there. Now you will have to deal with, okay, I have to do it in this particular province. Who do I have to talk to now? So I have to, and the question now is, does this province even still exist? Maybe it was merged with another province.
It's like learning everything from scratch.
In that sense, no, on the practical sense. So I think in that sense, it's something that's worth looking at because again, you are giving approval power to people who did not have it, and those people will have to learn how. There's a learning curve. You do not learn overnight on how to evaluate investment plans, how do you evaluate proposals and all of these things. This will not happen overnight. Whereas the national government, who used to be approving all of these investments for a long time, already know how to do it. So I think in that sense, the investors will have to be wary of this practical difficulty that we have seen. In fact, we have investors now who are applying for all of these permits, and they're asking us, oh, PJ, how long will it take you to get this approval? And inadvertently, the answer we say, because this department has been reorganized. This regulator has now been abolished. So we don't know how they will now recalibrate or repurpose themselves and approve all of these permits and licenses. So again, there's a learning curve, and there is going to be a lead time, I would suppose. Of course, the intention is to make it more streamlined. The intention is to make it more effective, to deal with the fast-changing requirements of what the investment requires. No? But again, organizations being organizations, ultimately there really will be a difficulty in terms of lag time, in terms of learning curve. So that is something that I'm sure the investors will have to consider.
However, there's a good thing is that for the first time, investors don't have to wait for months or years or potential level.
We
periods,
hope
right?
so.
Yeah.
We hope so. That is the intention, definitely. Especially if you are in certain how should you say it, preferred investments, like again your high technology, your AI, your data centers, and all of these things. These are supposed to be now fast tracked.
Right.
So approvals will supposedly, under the law, should now happen faster. But again, we are hoping that these changes are not only on paper, that we can actually see it in action. I'm sorry if I sound a bit pessimistic in that sense. I'm talking about learning curves and all of these things. I just speak of my experience in other countries. But again, we have to be realistic about it. And especially when we advise our clients, we have to be frank and candid. The fact that the regulations are there, it's very good. The intentions and the purposes are very good. But again, learning curves and delays will ultimately have to happen. We have to be content.
Right. So from our conversation so far, I think that because Vietnam legal environment just changes quite dramatically recently, right?
Yes.
A good thing is that our government is introducing a more structure, with very good intentions, a cleaner way for investors to deal with their investment projects. And at the same time, we also managing everything more strictly. So everyone has to use a BND ID.
Yes.
Companies have to disclose their beneficial owners. They don't have a choice.
Yes.
And then there's a stricter law on personal data protection.
Yes.
Right? So with all that changes recently, if you have just one piece of advice for our audience overseas, what would it be, Vijay?
Study the law.
Right.
Study the law. Be aware of all of these changes. But I think keep your ears to the ground in that sense. So in that sense, compliance is important because compliance changes quite quickly. And therefore, you have to be able to be agile enough to be able to adapt to all of these regulatory changes. Like for example, can you already satisfy the UBO? The moment that this law comes into effect, are you able to disclose who your ultimate beneficial owners are? Are you able to identify who they are? So you have to be able to be aware, first of all, and be agile with respect to knowing compliance. And then, of course, the second is relationships. Relationships both with people who would know the information you need to know, and I'm pertaining, of course, to advisors, lawyers, ISCA, people who are actually on the ground that you can approach and ask. But that also at the same time is also establishing relationships with the regulators, especially now that there are new regulators, new provinces are
Local regulators.
Local regulators, people who are going to be overseeing. So all of these things you will now have to recalibrate. Previously, you just had to know who was, you just had to talk to the people in Hanoi, people in Ho Chi Minh. Now you have to talk to all of these people in the province that you're actually doing business with if you are going to get all of these approvals. So relationships in that regard do matter. Establishing, trying to understand where they are coming from, and trying, of course, to understand what their requirements are. And these are all new. These are not found in all of those old regulations which have now been superseded. So, compliance in that sense, be aware of the compliance requirements, and try to establish relationships in terms of advisors and people who know and people who will decide on how your investment will proceed.
Thank you for providing such clear insight.
I don't know if it was clear, but I hope it was helpful.
I think it's quite clear for the audience to know what were the recent changes.
Yeah. In the meantime, I hope you guys find my sharing helpful. If there's anything else,
Definitely. It's I think it's very helpful for me and for the audience.
Sure.
It's great having you today again.
Yes, thank you.
And I think that's the end of our episode today. Thank you so much again for listening to our podcast. And we look forward to welcoming you again in our next episode soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.